Hello, and welcome to CS201 Summer Edition. This is the rest of Chapter 4 and Chapter 5. So, we left off with talking about dynamic text. Dynamic text is basically using JavaScript to change the value of text fields in HTML. So, there's a couple different ways to do that, to display text in a page. One is you can basically say, use an alert statement. So on alert, or on click rather, if you click something, then an alert message comes up. In this case, it says, yeah, right. Alert windows are useful if you just want to display a really quick message. So basically, in the input HTML, in the HTML of the page, you would put input type equals button, value equals click for free money, on click alert equals yeah, right. Another way of doing it is using an inner HTML element. This would be a text element like a div, a span, a p. If you change the .inner HTML to this, you can actually modify the HTML as it sits on the web page. This means you can dynamically change the page based on some click of a JavaScript button or some other JavaScript call. Example of this is here. The div in this case says welcome to my site. If we wanted to change this output div to say if you have trouble with this site, contact admin@foob.bar, we could put the input type button value equals click for help, and then on click we could change the inner HTML to that value. If you have trouble with this site, contact admin@foo.bar. So error messages come up from time to time. Basically, this is a syntax error, an example of a syntax error. This would be ignored by the browser and still displayed, and error message would end up being displayed. So for example, in this case, if we said this example is illegal because the string is broken across lines, that would be called an unterminated string literal. If you were missing a right parentheses after an argument list or missing a semicolon, then that would be also an error message. This next example shows generating a quotations page, so that basically if you click any one of these buttons, it generates a quotation from that appropriate person. So that is something you'll be doing in your exercises, which you should follow along in the book. In this case, in the on-click, we should say get element by ID inner HTML, welcomes to my page, I'm glad you're here. If you wanted to do that, you would basically have to use apostrophes inside the string, and in that case, you use a single apostrophe. So moving on now to Chapter 5. Chapter 5 is some more JavaScript stuff, basically giving you more of a look into JavaScript variables and that kind of thing. And more user interaction types. So text boxes in HTML are just event handlers that enable the user to interact with the page. You might want to have the user enter in information into that page, etc. For calculating grades or doing whatever it is you want to do. You use the input type text in HTML to be able to do that. And then users can do that, and the JavaScript variables can access that text box by calling its value attribute. So you say get element by ID, box ID. Here we have declared box ID to be the input type equals text with the ID equal box underscore ID, all capitals. So that's the variable name for that particular text box. And then we say document.get element by ID, box ID to actually access it. So here's a greetings page where you just enter your name. You click for greeting and it would say hello and then whatever your name is. In this case, basically we're calling the ID name box. So down below you'll notice that we say document.get element by ID name box dot value and then plus and whatever your name is. This one is an example of a form letter generator where basically we enter the recipient's name. Here we've got like Buddy, for example, his birthday, and then you enter a form letter and it says, "Dear Buddy, have you heard about my birthday, which is coming up on February 29th? It would mean a lot for me to see if you can make it to my birthday, etc." So it's just an on-click, and then you type out the you do document.getElementById recipient box.value, and that recipient box comes from here, and then .getElementById activity box dot value is the birthday, and date box is the particular day of the birthday. Do have to take care when involving a lot of text and box types. This one basically shows you that any part of the message enclosed in quotes is treated as plain text. That does include formatting tags. So if you want to do formatting, you need to actually take care. So for example, dear, that is prefaced by a P, and notice that that goes directly into the inner HTML, and then you do a P dear plus document.getElementById the value, and so on and so forth. And you concatenate those with the plus. JavaScript assignments can also be used to directly assign values to variables. So .getElementById mystery img.width can be equal to 100, for example. Variable names can be used to symbolize changes in values. So, for example, username equals Dave. And then we can say, now that we've said username equals Dave as a variable inside of JavaScript, we can now say document.getElementById output div.innerHTML equals hi plus username. So username is now this freestanding variable that's sitting in our JavaScript that we can use to modify things and add to values. This is a list of reserved words that cannot be used in JavaScript because the JavaScript language uses these words, so you cannot use these for variable names. Variable names can simplify complex code because basically, like in this example, we say hello plus username plus welcome to my page plus do you mind if I call you plus username. We've used username twice, which username comes from document.getElementById namebox value. So username is a substitute for that long line of JavaScript code. A lot of pages will follow a same basic pattern. For example, here we say var1 equals document.getElementById boxId1, var2 equals boxId.2. That way you can concatenate all of those variables together to do your displaying. Sometimes variables can be stored in temps as well. So here we've got an image swapper program that basically says saved equals document.getElementById left img.source, and then document.getElementById left image.source equals right image.sourced, and then document.getElementById right image equals source.saved. So we take the variable saved to put into it the value of whatever getElementById left image is and stick it in saved as a temporary variable that's just saving our HTML that we're going to display. So importantly, to computer science, each unit of information processed by a computer belongs to some data type. It's either a string, a number, or a Boolean. In JavaScript, it's what we call loosely typed. So it means that you don't have to specify which one of these data types it's going to be. However, once you do specify one, so for example, we say phrase equals howdy plus do, that is now going to be considered a string, in other words, a phrase. Whereas if we say 50 divided by 4, that is now going to be storing a number. So whatever you put into it is what the variable type becomes in JavaScript. So if a variable appears in that description, or in that expression rather, the value assigned to that variable is substituted. So we say x equals 24, so x is now a number which equates to 24. Also, be careful to not think of the equals as equaling equality. It represents assignment. So we're putting something into something else with the equals sign. Other useful facts about JavaScript numbers. We can use scientific notation. 1e24 equals 1 times 10 to the 24th. So when we are accessing numbers from a text box, we need to take special care when doing that, because if we say document.getElementById numbox.value, that actually comes in as a string. If we want to display that as a text, or if we want to display that as a number, we need to actually do something to it. So if the user entered 12 in the box, you end up saying 1 more is 121. That's because my number plus 1 is literally just the number 12 as a string plus 1. So that's 121 instead of what you would expect it to be, 13. So in order to get around that, we need to do a parse float function. Parse float is a function that maps from a string to an actual float value number, an actual real number value. So if we say document.getElementById.value, we'd get 123 by it. But if we actually say parse float on that big thing, on document.getElementById userbox.value, we would then get 123 as a number that can then be added to the number 1. So we'd end up with like 124, for example. That becomes important on the tip calculator example, where basically we end up saying that we want a tip calculator program, and if you enter in the check amount and the tip percentage is going to be 15%, we need to actually do a parse float on that. So we got to take the 4250, turn that into a number, turn that into the number 4250, then take 15% and multiply it by that number, and then that ends up being what the tip is. So in this case, $6.37.5. Again, that's another common pattern where basically anytime you've got a numbered value in a text box that you want to use as a number, you need to do a parse float on it. So here we see that var1 is going to be a parse float, var2 is going to be a parse float, all the way up to varn is going to be a parse float, and then all of those things can be treated as numbers later. Now, so one common thing to talk about at this point is errors in debugging. In computer terms, a bug refers to an error in the program. It actually goes back to back in the day of vacuum tubes, where they actually found bugs in some of the vacuum tubes that caused the errors. There can be syntax errors, there can be runtime errors, and there can be logic errors. Logic errors are flaws in the design of the program. So it's like you incorrectly did something that is causing the computer to act in a certain way. Syntax errors is more of a typo error, where you just type something wrong. Runtime errors are usually things like dividing by 0 and stuff like that. One useful thing to show at this point is actually the Firefox has a debugging tool that I'll show you. And I will show you that in class today. Today is Friday, the 10th, and I'll be showing some debugging information so that you can debug your syntax errors and your logical errors and that kind of thing. All right, so I will see you in class today, and you will have a quiz on this content. Thank you.